Hi and welcome to lesson 10 where we're going to be exploring types of data. To start off, I'm going to open up Microsoft Excel. Once open, I'm going to then open the lessons spreadsheet that I was working on before. Now we've got two worksheets. I'm clicking on the tabs at the bottom, that's what these are called, tabs. And the first sheet has become a little bit messy. I've mixed the sizes of the cells up. So what I'm going to do is give myself something clean to work with. I'm going to right click on the sheet tab and select delete. It's going to warn me I can't undo this, and I'm simply going to confirm the deletion. I've only got sheet 2 now. And what I'm going to do, as we've done before, I'm now going to double click, that's click twice with the left hand mouse button, and then I'm just going to rename this. Let's call this one types of data. Okay, so what do I mean by types of data? Well, we've already seen that I can type things in and they're going to be accepted into the cell. Each cell can hold one piece of data and only one piece of data, but I can keep typing things in, and we know that we've got over 1 million cells down by over 2.5 million cells left to right, so we've got a lot to play with. What if I put in a number? Well, suddenly I've got a change. The number has moved to the right of the cell while the words are on the left of the cell. What Excel is recognizing here is that these first two are text, these are words, while this third one is a number, and it's recognizing it as a number, and that's really useful. I can do decimal numbers. I can put in dates. I can put in times. So there's a range of things that Excel will recognize, and they will recognize it differently to simply text that we started off with before. So what kind of types do I have available? Well, if we look here, I've got a range of options that I can select here. In fact, this one that says number is a little bit disingenuous because it's really not about just number, it's about all the data types. And if I click here, I can see a number of the most popular formats that the system uses. We've got general, it's not really defined, but over here is text. So if I go to this cell here, I can see that it's marked general. I could tell it to be text. Nothing's changed. It was text before. I could go to here. It's still seeing it as general, but it's treating it as a number format. I could define it as number. The thing about that is Excel's now decided that because it's a number, and now I've confirmed it as a number, it's given me 2 decimal places, and I might not want those. So that's a little bit frustrating. I can get around that. If I look at this number area under the Home tab, I've got these options here. This one removes the decimal places. This one increases the decimal places. So if I wanted to return just a 2, I simply remove all those trailing zeros. Okay, so that's really useful. What else can I do with these buttons here? Well, let's say I put 2.3. That's very nice, but maybe it's not 2.3. Maybe it's some money. So I can simply click on this button and it will change it to your locality's currency. But what if I don't want it in that currency? Well, if I click on the little drop down next to it, I can change the currency. So there's US, there's the euro, and I can go to more accounting formats and it will give me a range of symbols that I'm able to use. So let's just look at that again. I can enter a number, So it looks like 4.5 is messy for currency. Click on there, click on the currency, and it will change it into currency. If I want to change the currency type, I can use the most popular ones in my region. Or if I want to be more elaborate, then I can click on more accounting formats, and then I can decide which format I would want to use. And there's, as you can see with the scroll bar here, there is a lot of them. So that's really useful. I've got currency. You'll also notice that it changed it from 4.5 to 4.50. So it's recognized that it should have the right decimal places for that format. I can use decimals. But I might decide that actually that's not just a decimal, it's a percentage. So I could use the percentage sign. I can even type in a number and using the keyboard press the percentage sign and the computer will recognize it as a percentage sign. So I can create percentages using the keyboard or change numbers into percentages by clicking on this symbol here. What if I type in a large number? Well, I have this option here. I might be in a situation where I want this to have commas to separate out the characters. So I'm going to click on that and it's going to add characters. Notice it's put trailing zeros. We can get rid of those or put those back. Notice it's seeing, can you see it's saying accounting there? It's assuming that this column is all part of this accounting range. If I click somewhere else for general, then it will act differently. I've got short date and long date. So I can take a date like the 13th of the 1st 2022 that I used earlier, select it, it's chosen it. If we just check, it says date. I can change it to long date or I can change it back to short date. It's up to me. And obviously we have time there. Other ones we've got, well, let's look at our giant number here. I could change that to scientific. Remember I said earlier I could put in decimals, but I could change those to fraction and that will work. So there's a number of formats I've got available to me that I can work with here. The difference, by the way, between currency and accounting is down to the way the numbers are represented. So let's put in some nice numbers. Let's select those numbers and then I'm going to choose currency. So I now have everything spaced out and that's quite nice. I'm going to extend the size of this cell. I'm going to take it to 100 and you can see that that's all stuck to the left hand side. Now what I'm going to do is keep the same numbers. Select them again and this time choose accounting. Now if I widen the cell, you'll notice that for accounting purposes the symbol is being kept to the one side and the value to the other side. There are also changes for negative values. Let's use this and I'm going to make this negative. Now I could just start typing the number again, but actually one of the things I could do much more effectively is start using this formula bar. I'm going to go up to the formula bar, I'm going to click just before the first one, I'm going to put a minus symbol in there and press enter. Now let's put the minus symbol on this side of the pound sign. I'm going to go to here and do the same thing here, put the minus sign in and press enter, and it's done the same thing here. So it's changing the format, allowing me to see how the currency is presented, so the currency is much clearer here. Let's have a look at one other thing. I'm going to take this number and I'm going to put the commas. Can you see how the cell is expanding? And you might have caught a glimpse of something when I was using the date symbol. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to force Excel to not display the whole number. If you see this series of hash marks, it's not a problem. The computer is telling you, Excel is telling you, that it can't display all of the data, that more data exists. It's just saying you need to widen the cell, and now you can see it. So we've got a range of data types available to us. This is just the main selection. If I go to more number formats, I've got much more control. I can even create my own. But we'll look at that at a later date. So that's types of data. This tool here is incredibly useful. So we're going to use that more as we go through the lessons. Anyway, in the next lesson, we're going to look at formatting the data. So see you in lesson 11. Well, welcome to lesson number 11. In this one, we're going to be looking at formatting data. To do this, I want to add a new worksheet. So we remember that we go to the plus, and I simply click on the plus, and a new tab will appear. We don't want to use sheet 1, so I'm going to double click, and I'm going to change that to formatting data, simply to tell us what's going on. And then what I'm going to do is simply put some data in here. Let's do the ones I used from before. The two words cat and dog. Now what I can do here is do things that we've probably experienced in other programs. For example, I can choose the word cat and I can change the font face. I can change the font size. I can make things bold, italicized, underline, alter the underline to double underlined. I can change the font color or choose a new color. I can use these buttons to make the font larger or smaller in steps. It's worth noting with underline that underline really shouldn't be something you use because it makes the text harder to read. Underline comes from the time of typewriters when underlining was the only thing we could do. If any of you remember the typewriter, it used to be that you used to have to push the carriage back slightly, hold down the shift key, press the underline and hammer hard to create the only form of emphasis we had. You might have wanted to roll it back and just type over the words, but you ended up with blurred, not bold text. So underlining is something you should resist. Similarly with italics, it looks very nice, but for certain people, particularly people with quite profound dyslexia, will find italicization much harder to read. So unless it's really important, it's worth not having it. If the spreadsheet's for your own use and you don't have any interference with it, then use it. But otherwise, I wouldn't bother. So we can change the format of the font simply by clicking on the text. Now, there's not a lot more I can do with that. One of the other things we might want to pay attention to is in the previous lesson we looked at the number option, and now we're looking at the font option, and we're going to look in a moment at the alignment option. So if I look at these, I can see there's one thing all three of these have got in common, and several of the others do. There's this little symbol in the bottom right hand corner. When I move my mouse over top, I get a bit of a help box pop up, tells me what I could do. that thing in the brackets is telling me shortcuts, the control key on the keyboard, holding the shift key on the keyboard and pressing F. But at the moment I'm just going to click on it. When I do so, I get this box come up. Now you can see I can change the font here. I can make it regular, italic, bold, bold italic. I can change the font size. I can change the underline and use actually slightly different options. I can change the colors. I can even choose strike through, that will put a line through. I can make it superscript, so it goes up. Super means to go up, like Superman. Or I could choose subscript, which moves it down. Sub meaning below. So I can actually alternate between the two, so I can have text up high or text down low, and that will work quite effectively. But I'm going to leave that for the moment. So I can use that. You'll notice I have more tabs here, and these actually relate to some of the other things. We've got the border tool on the font menu, and there's the border tool that we saw before. We've got the bucket here, and that relates to this menu here. We've got the number, and we've seen that before here. And we've got the alignment, which is something we're going to look at in a moment. I'm just going to click cancel. Okay, so let's just have a look at something else we can do. So I'm going to put x2. Now that might look a little bit odd, but hopefully you'll remember x squared from your time at school, or you might have used it recently or any other time. But that's clearly not what I've got here. Now I'm going to use the formula bar just to get up to the text here. Another way of representing this is to use the carat symbol. That is holding the shift key down and then tapping the 6, the key with number 6 on it, and you'll get the carat symbol. And that's a symbol used in computing frequently to mean to the power of. So that means x squared. But it certainly doesn't mean x squared as we learnt it. It's just a little bit confusing. Now I've been using the formula bar, but I could simply just double click in the cell and I can edit it there. So I'm going to get rid of the carat symbol, and instead I'm going to hold down the shift key while I've got that flashing line. That flashing line is called the cursor, and while that cursor is flashing, I'm going to hold down the shift key. I'm going to press my arrow key that's on my keyboard towards the right, and I've selected that too. Now look at this menu bar, look at the toolbar. So many of the options are grayed out. That means we can't access them. But notice with the font one, not only can I access it, but I have this item here. I'm going to click, and we've got the menu we saw just a minute ago. Notice all the other options have gone. I've just got the font. But this allows me to then choose the superscript, for example, and click OK, and then click away, and now I've got the x squared we're used to seeing. Similarly, I could do a similar thing with y2, but maybe I want this to be marked as a second character, so instead of doing superscript, I do subscript and click on OK, and now I get that as well. So I can use the font tool on individual characters within the cell as well as for the whole cell itself. Notice how my characters at the moment are on the left hand side of the cell. I can change that. I can tell it to appear on the right hand side by using this alignment tool, which is right align. I can click on the middle one, and that's called center, and that will put them in the dead center of the cell. I can do something else. We clearly have got these here, but I might need to build a bit of space for you to see. So I'm going to select these two rows. I'm going to pull the cells down 50 pixels each. And now you can see that the text is at the bottom of each of the cells. So I'm going to select them and I'm going to tell it to be centered. So that is vertical centering. And obviously I can also tell it to be at the top. I can do that individually, obviously, but sometimes it's nice to do it on both. There are other things I can do. For example, we're used to the idea now that when I put some text in, the text runs past the cell. And we're used to the idea that I can double click there and now it extends to the cell. But I can also use the symbol here to control the direction of the text. At the moment it's running horizontally, but I could decide that I want to run it vertically. And again, double click and it will fit the text in. I might decide that that's really difficult to read, so I'm going to rotate the text or rotate the text the other way. So I can do a number of things with this text. I can just start rotating it. I can go clockwise or counterclockwise. And obviously I can choose the format symbol, and let me just go back to that at the bottom, format cell alignment, and we should be used to the idea that this bottom option invariably opens up a menu, and this is the menu we glanced at momentarily before, and here I can tell it to center horizontally or put it at the bottom of the cell, the center of the cell. I can even change the direction of the text to anything I would like it to be. I can alter it to all I like. Now if I've done something and I don't want to have that, maybe I don't like that and now I'm stuck, I'm going to introduce you to your best friend ever, and that's this button here. This button here is the undo button. Rather than go back and alter everything, I can simply click on that and it will restore me back to the last state. If I've done lots of errors, I can keep clicking on that and it will walk me through each of my errors until I get back to where I started. And if I've done many errors, it's recorded everything I've done since I opened the spreadsheet. So there's lots of things. Sometimes I might have undone something and then wished I hadn't. So there is a redo button that will put everything back to where we were. So what else have we got here? Well, we can increase indentations. So let's take this cell, let's widen this out nicely. Let's put these to the left hand side. Remember, I want these to be auto-filled. I'm going to choose the whole sheet. I'm going to go down here. I'm simply going to double click, and so everything alters to its contents. What I'm going to do here is tell that to indent. Indent just pushes in by roughly 4 spaces, and I can keep indenting, or I can remove the indent, decrease the indent. So I can do that with any text. If I've got a wide enough area, I can create indentations. Okay, only 2 more buttons on the alignment time to look at. So let's have a brief look at these. So this is some text. And what I'm going to do is click on that, and I've clicked on this wrap text button. Just to show that again, I've clicked on the wrap text button. Nothing has happened. But let me now shrink the cell down. All I've got is the word sum. Again, nothing seems to have happened. But now if I double click on there, the text is wrapped down through the box. Just to show the effect without wrap text, that's it without, that's it with. And it's automatically recognizing that it now needs to widen the cell for me. So I can simply change the wrap and wrap text within the cell. The last option here is this merge and center. Now there's a number of options here you might want to look at, but at the moment let's just look at the one that we've got by default. Now I've got a sentence here and it runs over more than one cell, and I could simply widen the cell. But there are times when I've got data around here that I can't just widen the cell because that will make other data out of line. So sometimes it's useful for me to be able to select the cells. Remember, that's click, hold the mouse button down and drag, then let go. I can tell it to merge and center, and that one cell, those 3 cells have now become one single cell. Now the center part simply means that when I widen these, the text will remain in the center. I can change that by using these buttons here. But merge and center allows me to merge one cell, more than one cell, into a single cell. If I click on merge and center again, it returns me back to where I was with this piece of text in that one cell there. So in this lesson we've looked at how to format text and how to do alignment for that text, and that's quite a lot. So I'll leave you with that, and in the next lesson we're going to be looking at something called autofill, creating a series. Okay, welcome to this lesson on creating a series, something called autofill. And in this one I've created already a new worksheet. I've got the tab here, so I clicked on the plus, it said sheet whatever number, I double clicked and I changed it to creating a series. And what I've then gone and done is added some data into these cells, as you can see here. And we're going to work with these at the moment. What we're going to do is I'm going to click onto the cell here, and I'm going to notice that when I click on the cell, not only is it the active cell, but down at the bottom right hand corner is a small green, in this case green, square. And if I move my mouse over top of it and I'm very gentle about it, it changes to this small black plus sign. And that's really important. Usually the Excel one is this large white shadowed plus cell, and if I go to the cell, it changes on the edges to this arrow, which we'll look at much later on. But this bottom right hand corner is very special. What I'm going to do is I'm going to click, hold my left mouse button down, and I'm going to pull this downwards. And what that has successfully done is completed this series. What it's done is taken this one and replicated it all the way down. Now that's really nice. That means that I can put one piece of data in and replicate it. Let's have a look at that again. I've got another one here. Go to the bottom right hand corner, click with the left hand mouse button, hold the left hand mouse button down and drag the mouse downwards until I get to where I want, and then let go of the mouse button, and that occurs there. So that's really nice. Have you noticed this keeps popping up? This little box, you'll see it quite frequently. It's got context related menu options. I'm just going to click on the little arrow to the side, and I've got fill series. So it's done something called copy cells. That's the option that's been ticked, but I've actually got fill series. Let's see what that does. Now what this has done is it's recognized that there is a gap, that it's decided to increment these numbers by 1 each time. So instead of selecting the cells and then on that menu option that's there, this one here, instead of leaving it as copy cells, I can do fill series and it will fill them all in. But I don't have to do a whole series of ones and then do that. I could click, hold the mouse button down, select two cells just like we did before, let go of the mouse button, now go to the bottom right hand corner, click again, hold the mouse button down, and then slowly bring the mouse down. Because the first two numbers I had were in a sequence, Excel, I've just let go of the mouse button, has recognized that there's a gap of 1 between these, and it's then completed the series. That means that I can choose something like 1 and 3, which is a gap of 2 between it, and it replicates that further. I've also got 1 to 9 here, a gap of 8, and it will replicate that as well. I don't have to just do this with numbers. Here's a date, and I can pull the date down, and it's changed all the days of the week. Now I might not want the days of the week. Well, let's look at this menu again. Now it's recognised as a date, and it's done fill series, but it did fill days. I've now told it to fill months, so it's changed the decision, and it's changed it to the months have changed. Or I could tell it to fill years, and it's changed the years for me. So this little menu is worth looking at and exploring. There are other options available to us. For example, let's do the 1, 2 again. I'm going to select them like I did last time, but this time, though I do go to the bottom right hand corner of both cells, you can see it there, little square, I'm now going to right click and hold the right hand mouse button down, and now I'm going to continue down. I'm now going to let go. I'm now given options before it populates. There's the fill series again, but look at this, I've got growth trend. If I just simply say fill series, that's going to do a linear trend, 1, 2, 3, 4, as we did in the 1, 3, 5, 7 and the 1, 9, 17. But let's have a look at growth trend. Now that's noticed that there's a multiple of 2 here, that there's a growth between here, so it's actually doubling the numbers each time. And so if I choose 1 and 3 again, I go to the bottom right hand corner, I click the right hand mouse button, hold it down, drag the mouse downwards, get to the bottom, let go of the right hand mouse button, and then choose growth, and I can see it's now doing multiples of 3. So I have these options available to me. But what else could I do with this? Well, and actually, there's a lot more we can do with these, but for what we need, we're just going to look at some of the nicer examples. And one of the ones I really like is the fact that I can do this. I've put the word Monday in. I don't have to go down. I can always click, this is left hand mouse button, and I can always pull it to the side, and you can see from the help what's happening. It fills in the days of the week. What about, well, I don't have to remember how to spell February or anything else. It will do it for me. But we computer scientists are lazy. Why write January when I can write Jan? And it will replicate those. Why write Monday when I can write Mon? And it can replicate those. So there are a number of things I can do with the fill series, and the fill series is really good with working with data, and it's really good with working with formulae. But you might be sitting there saying, well, what's a formulae? Well, the good news is that's what you're going to find out in the next lesson. I hope that's been useful. See you next time. Bye. Okay, so in this lesson we're going to be looking at formulae. As you can see, I've created a new tab called Creating Formulae, so we've got that and we know we can refer back to this, and we're going to have a look at this as we go through. Now, we've already seen that we can simply put any numbers or any data with any cell. And a cell, as I have said a number of times, can hold one piece of data. That's all it can do. We now want Excel to perform calculations. That's the power of Excel, and all we're seeing at the moment is it holding data. So we want Excel to perform calculations. The way you tell Excel to start doing a calculation, that it's going to do a calculation, the very first thing you put into the cell is the equal sign. Now, the equal sign is an instruction to Excel that anything after this is something it needs to do, not simply store, but something it needs to do. So let's do something really simple. Now the star is where I've held down the shift and the 8 key, and that's equivalent to our multiplication. In computers, we don't have a clear symbol for multiplication, so the star symbol has become the symbol for multiplication. It's better than putting an X there, that is just a letter. So 2 star 3 is the same as 2 multiplied by 3. Now, for making it easier to read, I've put spaces either side of the multiplication symbol, but that is purely for me to make it easier for me to read it. It has no impact upon the computer at all. I could quite easily have put it like that and say it is something I am used to doing. You can do it, you could ignore it, you could put a space there and then not bother, or not bother putting a space and do that. The computer doesn't care. I only do it because once your formulae get to a certain size, they can look confusing, and putting spaces in helps. So the equal sign is telling Excel to do a calculation, and then I've followed it by that calculation, and if I press enter, the calculation is carried out, and the cell displays the result of that calculation. 2 times 3 after all is 6. This is where the formula bar becomes useful, because if I go back to the cell, I can still see the 6, but at the top in the formula bar I can see the calculation. It's still there. So I can actually alter the calculation. I noticed I didn't put a space there, and I traditionally do, but again, that's down to me, that's personal. And then I can press enter and it will carry it out. While I'm working on the calculation, it will appear in the cell again, and you can actually work in the cell, but why bother when you've got a beautifully long formula bar? So let's look at another one. There's 2 plus 3. Now the plus symbol, the addition symbol, is exactly what we expect it to be. And we do that by doing the shift and the equals symbol. The equals is next to your backspace key, which in turn is just above your enter key. So 2 plus 3. And by no surprise, we will get 5. Now we've got 2 minus 3. So the computer can do subtraction, and again the minus symbol is exactly the same as we learnt in mathematics, so there's no change there, and that is simply the key next to the equals key, no shift now needed. And if I press enter, I get minus 1. 2 minus 3 is minus 1. And at this point, I wish I hadn't chosen the numbers 2 and 3, simply because we know we're going to end up with a rather nasty fractional number, but that's fine, we can do that. This is division. The division sign we do use in mathematics like this. There is no line with 2 dots that we can use. This is the only division sign that we have. So we can do that quite nicely. And that gives us the horrible fraction that I was talking about. But it's fine. Notice Excel has made it fit into the cell, so it's rounded it up to this 7 there. If I extend the cell, then it will add a few more, and I could always increase the accuracy, but why would I bother? Anyway, we're there. So I can perform simple mathematical functions using a formula, simply using the equal sign and then the maths. My only question is, why would I? After all, I know what 2 times 3 is. It's 6. And I might not want to remember that, but I could do that in a calculator and then everything would be fine. So why bother? Am I just going to use this enormous spreadsheet simply to do calculations that I could do on a calculator? And obviously the answer is there's more to it than this. But those fundamental calculations are really useful. So what else can I do? Well, now let's put some numbers in, just box standard data. I'm just going to put the numbers 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And what I could do is I can do equals. And I can say equals, and then I can either use the mouse to click on this cell with the 1 in it, and notice what happens, equals C11. That's the cell reference of the cell that's now got what's called the ants going around. They're just showing us that this is the cell we're talking about, C11. So that is now saying, oh okay, yep, that's fine, no problems at all, I'm looking at that cell there. And I could simply say plus 3. Oh, that's really exciting. I've said 1 plus 3 and it's told me it's 4. Oh, so what's the benefit of that? Well, let's do the next one. Equals that minus 1. Well, we've got, again, cell reference C12, minus 1 is 1. 2 minus 1 is 1. That's very impressive, but so what? Okay. I'm going to use the arrow key on my keyboard and I can still go to the cell next. So I can either use the mouse or the arrow keys on my keyboard. It doesn't matter. And what I'm going to do here is multiply that by 5. And then obviously the next one is a division. However I do this, this one's going to look a bit weird, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to go down to this cell here and I'm going to do equals this cell divided by this cell. So I've clicked on 2 cells and notice the one with the ants on it is the last cell I clicked on, and it's got a different border, different color. The first border was blue, and that was true in all our cases, and the cell reference in the address in the formula is also blue, but the second cell reference is C14. So the second cell reference is in red, and that is also in red. It's showing us that we can quickly glance at these and see how they fit into our formula. So I'm using 2 cell references. So I'm now doing 5 divided by 4. Let's press enter. 1.25. But so what? Could I not have done those on a calculator? Yes. But what if I change this number? Let's change it to 7. Instantly, the answer in here is changed. This cell is now not doing 1 plus 3, but 7 plus 3. If I change this to 5, I've now got 5 minus 1, which is 4. This cell was 3 times 5, but I could now put 20 in there and find that 20 times 5 is 100. And I can change either of these numbers. Let's change this one to 9 and instantly it changes. And if I change that to 18, I stop getting a horrible number in the cell there because it's now doing 18 divided by 9. So what I've now got is I've got the capability of recalculating things based upon the values I'm putting in. As these values change as well. the cell references means it's only looking at the contents of that cell, not saying the number in there is always going to be the number I'm going to use. I can change the contents and the formula will recalculate a new result. That's the power of formulae, that I can use one or two cell references or more and calculate a complex series and undertake a complex calculation, and it will constantly recalculate that result as I alter the numbers. Now that's much more powerful than the calculator, where you'd have to keep adding, where you'd have to keep recalculating, re-entering all the data into your calculator. Okay, so we've looked momentarily at creating formulae, and that works really nicely. What we're going to do now in the next video is look at using formulae and the autofill function. See you in the next video. Okay, so in this video we're going to be looking at formulae and the autofill. I've already created a worksheet called relative addressing, and I've even put some data in. Just as a reminder, the autofill is simply by clicking on the first cell we're interested in, holding the mouse button down and dragging it over the second one so we get the pattern. Excel is looking for the pattern between those two numbers. We then go to the bottom right hand corner, click, hold the mouse button down and drag down slowly until we get to where we want, and we can let go. Excel will then autofill all the other numbers for us. Another way of doing that is to click on the number, the single number you want, go to the bottom right hand corner again, but this time hold down the right hand mouse button. Drag that downwards. It's showing 1 in the help bar, but as soon as I let go, it then offers me to copy cells, which is the 1, or fill series. If I go to fill series, it then recognizes that it needs to increment by 1, so I get the same result. So I could now do a formula that simply says equals that times 3, let's say. But what if I wanted to multiply all these cells by 3? Well, that's easy enough. I now click on there. There's the formula up in the bar there. There's the result of the calculation. I can now go to the bottom corner and drag this downwards. And when I let go, it's now not doing simply B3 times 3, but if I go from the B3, so if I go from our first calculation to the one below it, B3 becomes B4. If I click in the formula bar, though I originally told it to look at cell B3 and multiply it by 3, when I auto-filled downwards, Excel increased by 1 the cell reference. So it's now B4, and the blue box is showing me that. And the next one is B5, and down here is B12. That is called relative addressing. It's relative. When I pull this down, Excel is using the next address relative to the next one. The reference here was altered by 1 cell because this cell is 1 cell away from the original. This cell here has incremented by 9 because it's 9 cells away from the original cell. Now I've got another sequence of numbers here, and I've got my calculations, and there's nothing wrong with me doing something like this, saying I want to have C3 and I'm going to divide it by that number. So I'm using the formula from before in a new formula. 3 divided by 1 is 3. If I now drag that downwards, they're all 3. So I've got this calculation and I'm dividing them by here, so this calculation is using that number there, that raw value, that raw data. This formula here is using this raw number on this side, but a formula on that side. So a formula can reference a formula, and we get a nice calculation. And the autofill means that I don't have to worry. I can now alter these numbers if I wanted to. And this will auto-calculate. Equally, I can change these numbers. And both formulae will update. It will change everything in both cells. So the autofill function is incredibly powerful. It allows me to write one formula and then replicate it down using relative addressing, and that works beautifully. That's how we are lazy in computer science. We don't want to write 10 formulae when I can write one, or in this case 2 formulae, and I only have to write those 2 to get 20 of them out. I've also got a block of numbers here. Equals. I don't have to just work an autofill vertically. I can also do it horizontally. Equally, I wanted to show that I can do more complex formulae. Let's just look at this. So we're doing n2. I'm going to multiply it by n3, and then I'm going to add n4. 14. So I've got n2 times n3, 4 times 3, plus the 2. Now I can pull that this way. And Excel is following my instructions throughout, each calculation being there. But let's look at something else. I'm now going to do 4 plus 3 multiplied by 2. So this is going to do 4 plus 3 multiplied by 2. 4 plus 3 is 7. Multiplied by 2, I should get 14. But I got 10. Well, okay. What's the calculation? The top number plus the second number multiplied by the third number. So I've got in this column here, I'd have 10 plus 5. So that's 15 times 3, 45. So let's just make sure we get 45. None of the results are showing correctly. Why is that? Well, hopefully you remember the rules in school of BIDMAS or BODMAS. That is, and I'm going to use Excel to help it, I prefer BIDMAS, though I was taught BODMAS, and that is that way around. That is brackets, then this is why I prefer it, indices, that's to the power of or square roots, division, multiplication, addition, and subtraction. Now this is the order in which things are processed. It's actually important to remember that division and multiplication are one and the same. So they are equal. They are done in order of being encountered. So if division comes before multiplication when you're reading left to right, division will be done first. But if multiplication comes first when you read left to right, then multiplication will be done first. The same thing is true with addition and subtraction. However, if your addition comes before your multiplication, for example, as we've got here, BIDMAS applies. That means multiplication is carried out first. This is not doing 4 plus 3 times 2. This is doing 3 times 2, which is 6, plus 4, because the rules of BIDMAS are being applied throughout. if I wanted to change that calculation, if I want to do the addition first, then I have to remember the ultimate part of this rule, brackets. So if what I'm trying to do comes after the operation, then I need to use the brackets to help me. That is, I'm going to go to the formula bar, click in the formula bar, put a brackets. Now be very careful. Sometimes when you move the arrow key, Excel won't move the cursor, but it will instead move one of the boxes. Now because I'm going into the formula here, that's fine, but you will find times when you think, oh, I'll go back over the formula. I'll show you an instance of that in a moment. You move the arrow key and it changes the cell reference. So my advice is, when you're working on formulae, don't use the arrow keys, use your mouse just to select where you want to go. There's the close bracket. Now it's doing 4 plus 3, 12, plus 2, 14. This now, if I replicate, remember this currently is not doing 10 plus 5, 15, times 3, 45. What it's actually doing is 5 times 3, which is 15, plus 10, which is 25. If I now autofill this across, 45 now appears because the brackets comes first before everything else. Indices are to the power. We'll have a look at that much later on and see how we do powers, but that comes after brackets. Now I was saying about the calculations. Let's say I was doing the calculation and I decided I was going to do 4 plus 3 multiplied by 2, and then I realized I didn't want to do plus, I wanted to do minus. So I could use the arrow keys, but notice as I do so, I'm now changing that box. The third box is changing. I now am getting my calculation confused. So if I use the arrow keys, I'm now not working in the function. Though I'm typing the function, I'm controlling the cell reference. So it's really important when I'm doing that, I have to now make sure I use the mouse. Now I can either do that in the formula bar or in the cell. As I said before, I recommend doing it in the formula bar simply because it's nice and long. And if I decided to do minus, I could do. And now I'm doing N2 minus N3 times N4, but we know the rules of BIDMAS, so it's doing N3 times N4, 3 times 2, which is 6, and then it's doing 4 minus 6, which is minus 2. Not 6 minus 4, remember that, it's doing 4 minus 6. It does the multiplication first, and then it subtracts that from N2. So BIDMAS is an important thing to remember when working with formulae. Do hope that helps. What we're going to look at is, in the next video, is a problem with relative addressing, and then how we resolve that issue. See you in the next video. So in the last video we looked at relative addressing, and that was a really nice way of just taking a value, right clicking on the bottom square, pulling that down, then telling fill series, and we get those numbers. We can then, relative addressing was the case of using that cell reference, carrying out a calculation, and then pulling that calculation down, using autofill again, and in this case it's altering the cell reference and relative to where you started from. By the way, I did want to point out one really nice thing about that series fill and with this calculation fill. So I could put a 1 there, and I can then tell the series, select that column, go to the fill statement up here and go to series, and I can just simply leave it as it is. Go down the column, use the linear progression, add 1 every time, click OK, and that's filled that number all the way down. If I then take this and I put equals, that cell multiplied by 5, for example, I can then take that and simply tell it to fill down, and you can see my computer's busily trying to work that out, and then that runs all the way down. So how far does that go? Well, I told you there's 1 million cells. So how can I prove that? Well, I could scroll down. That's going to take a very long time. One way of doing that is to hold down the control key and push the down arrow key. And that's taken us straight to the bottom. 1,048,576. There are now no more cells, and it's done the calculation all the way down. So I can fill this, and the fill series will give me that long number of numbers. Equally, if I want to go back to the top, control and the up arrow pushes me back up to the top. Now that's a little aside, it's a nice thing to have. Let's just clear those because that takes my computer some time to calculate. So we've looked at relative addressing, and we just used relative addressing to do that relative, and what it did was fill series down that relative addressing. That's excellent. So let's say that I wanted to take the number 4 and I want to multiply it, but by each of these numbers I put along here. Well, that's easy. I go to this cell here, I tell it I want to do a calculation, equals, I say take this number here and I want to multiply it by this number here. Now obviously that's going to do 4 times 4, which is 16. So when I pull that across, relative addressing is then going to ignore the 4 and instead use the 6, and then the 7, then the 3, then the 4, then the 2. So what we should get here is 6 times 4. Well, 6 times 4 is 24, and then 7 times 4, which gives me 28, and 3 times 4, which is 12, and 4 times 4, which is 16, and 2 times 4, which is 8. So let's see how we do. I'm going to pull that across. Now, without even knowing the maths, I know, for example, that 2 times 4 is not 16,128. I know that 4 times 6 is not 96. None of these are correct. Something has gone wrong. I'm going to check on my first formula. Yeah, that's correct. I wanted to do this 4 times this 4. So in the next cell, I want to do this 6 times this 4. So let's see if I got there. Notice I am using the 6. The relative addressing has worked correctly to go this way, but I'm not using the 4. And if we think about it, that makes sense. The computer has used relative addressing. So as I pull it this way, not only has it changed the cell reference by 1 each time, but it's also changed the cell reference by 1 here. So it's moved the cell reference from H3 to I3, but equally from G4 to H4. So it's gone from those 2 cells to those 2 cells. That's a problem with relative addressing. I didn't want this one to change. I wanted it to stay looking at that. So a really quick fix to that is go to this blue box and drag it and put it where I want it. That's a really nice little trick. You didn't see that before. And now that works. And these numbers have changed, but that's because they're all looking at this cell. This one is now looking at this cell. So now what I've got to do is drag this and put it there, and now that one's correct, but these... And now imagine if I've been doing that with one of those long series. I'm going to put the number 4 there, and I'm going to put a calculation in there that says this multiplied by this. Now what I'm then going to do is I'm going to replicate this all the way down as we did before. So go to series, fill it all the way down. I've got that 1 million now numbers, and what I'm now going to do is take this one and tell this one just to fill down, and now what that's doing is it's taking 1 times 4, then 2 times 4, then 3 times... No, it's not, because that relative addressing. I wanted this cell to always look at this 4, not come down. So I've now got to, that's when you're clicking in the wrong place, go to there, pull that up, and I've got to do that for 1 million cells. I'm not doing that. That's just not happening. Surely there's a fix to this. And there is. Let's go back. Remember, with computer science, we are all about being lazy. So what I'm going to do, in fact, what I'm going to do is I'm going to undo that. That's going to put the numbers back I've got there. Then I'm going to undo. So keep clicking undo. And those have gone. That's really nice. I'm going to go back to this cell in a moment, but let's now get rid of these. And let's look at this formula here. Remember, we're trying to be lazy. We want to type one formula and get all of the answers to work when we do an autofill. So we're looking at G4. We don't want this cell to change. What part of it do we not want to change? Well, we don't want it. When we put it this way, it's going to go from G to H. Let's just look at that again. This is G4. Now it's H4. The 4 has stayed consistent. It's still 4. But the column reference has gone from G to H. And that's what we don't want to have change. So what we do, we go to the front of there, just before the part we don't want to have change, and we put a dollar symbol. Now when I drag that across, it works. And if I click on there, we can see that says G4 with a dollar, and that says G4 with a dollar, and that says G4 with a dollar, and so on, all the way to the end. Similarly here, if I do equals this multiplied by this, but then I go just before the 1 because it's going to be R1, then R2, then R3. So it's not the column reference that changes here, it's the row reference that changes here. So I'm going to lock that row reference by putting the dollar in front of it. So think of the dollar as saying lock that column or lock that row. Here we're locking in that specific row, row number 1. The R can change. It's not going to, because we're not pulling it that way. But the R can change if it really wanted to. We're controlling that 1. So I'm going to press there. We still get 4. I can now go to here. I can now tell it to do a series fill. Click on OK. We now have our 1 million numbers. I can then go to here, tell it to fill downwards. And as we can see, it's now filled those all in. You might notice a bit of a jump. That's because that took my computer a long time to calculate all of those values. And I certainly don't want to do that again. But it's now doing 4 times all of those numbers. If we do a jump to the bottom, hold down the control key and press the down arrow, we can find out that 4 times 1,048,576 is 4,194,304. There's some useful information for you. So back to the top. To help my computer keep running, I'm going to get rid of those by just selecting them and deleting them. And we'll go back to this example here. This dollar locks that part of the formula in place, that part of the cell reference in place. In this case, the column reference. If I put a dollar next to the 4, just this side of the 4 to the left of the 4, I will lock in the row reference. And there's a really nice little calculation, nice little exercise you can do And there's a really nice little trick we can do if we wanted to work on that quite nicely. I'm just going to show it with a very simple number. Equals that. There's nothing wrong with having a cell reference one piece of data. We can do that quite often. There's good reasons for that, but we'll look at that later on. For now, we've got that. So what I can do is press the F4 key. This is the set of keys at the top of your keyboard marked F1, F2 all the way to F12. F is short for function, and you can program these. Excel adds some programming to these keys. F4 is one of them. Notice what happens. I'm just going to select the cell reference. I'm going to press F4 and it puts $signs each side. If I press that F4 again, it does it next to the row reference. If I press F4 again, it puts it next to the column reference, and if I press F4 again, it removes them all. And if I keep pressing it, it goes in a cycle. All of them, row, column, none of them. All of them, row, column, none of them. So F4 is a really neat way of quickly doing that in case you can't be bothered or can't click in those areas. But that will work. And if I do all of them and I press enter, then when I pull this cell down, it will just keep saying 4 because this one is still looking at that cell there, exactly there. So that's locked onto that cell, and it doesn't matter if I pulled that way. This cell here, which is now all this way down and all this way across, still is looking at that one cell there. I can lock it in. This is called absolute addressing. It's different from the one we looked at over here, which is relative addressing, and this uses a mixture of relative and absolute. Here we've just used absolute addressing. I hope that's helped. In the next video, we're going to be looking back at formatting cells. See you then. In this video on formatting cells, which is something we've partly looked at before, we're just going to finalize one last bit, get our heads around one small section. To do so, I've created another worksheet. Remember, just clicking on the plus. I've named it formatting cells. Remember, just double click and change what's in there to formatting cells. I'm now going to go to the button at the top between the column and row references to select the whole sheet, and for now I'm going to set the pixel width to 100. I'm going to do the same for the columns. I'm going to see how that comes out. Now on my screen that's come out quite nicely. If it's too big and bulky, then feel free to adjust those to a smaller dimension. And all I'm going to do is grab a 4x4 set of cells. So there's the active cell. This is my selected cell range. At the moment it's showing me the active cell. And all I'm going to do at the moment is go to the border control that we've looked at before, go to more borders, and again tell it inside and outside. And I could have very easily done that with the other tools, but we'll do that. I'm going to choose the first cell in the top corner. Something I can do very nicely now is use the bucket fill command. Yes, I can quite easily, let's put some data into there. There's A, and I've just put the caps lock on, B, C, D. By the way, just to show you, and I'm going to get rid of those, let's just select those cells again. If I now put A, yes, it goes the other way, but I could always do it that way, which really is, sorry, stop to think about the alphabet there, but it really is a neat little thing to do. So I've got those, goes back to the beginning, now I've got them. And just to help ourselves along, I'm going to center that and center it there. I'm going to make them a little bit larger, so let's stick them all 36 fits my cells really nicely. So there you go. So again, I'm going to select the first cell here. I'm going to go up to the bucket fill symbol here, and I'm going to click on that. And I get a fill color of yellow, which is exactly what I can just about see underneath the bucket. But I might not want yellow. So I can click on the down arrow next to it, and now I've got a range of colours that I can choose from. Just like we had with the font colours, I've got these here, so I can change the colour. The last colour selected is the option for that bucket fill, but I can continuously change those all I like. Now they're a nice range, but I might want more, so I've got the option of more colours at the bottom, and we've got used to seeing this. At the bottom of most menus is a more option that gives us even more control. Now what we've got here is a colour chart, and we've got a greater selection of shades of colour, so I can click there and that gives me that shade there. Equally with that, under custom I can actually either use click in different areas and then vary the intensity. So let's go over here. If I now vary the intensity of that, I get that, click on OK, and that now becomes the colour. You could see the original colour being displayed underneath current and new. If you're happy with the concept of RGB colours, then you can define how much red is in there, how much green and how much blue. Every colour on your computer is made up of those three colours mixed together. Red is obviously all red. Let's just cancel this, go over here, and then just to show you, go to more colours, custom. So if I set that to 255, which is the maximum value, 255, that's all to do with computers and the way they work. Now because it's got a background of white, that's 255, 255, 255, all the red, all the green, all the blue. So if I set green to 0 and I set blue to 0, I get 25500, and the red is the only colour coming through, and there's the red that I would get. If I instead switch off red, notice I've now got no colour, and no colour means I've got a black background. If I go to green and I put that at 255, then I get an intense green. And if I only put blue to 255, I get a nice blue. If I don't put it, maybe I go almost halfway, 124, I get a darker one. So the lower the number, the darker the shade of that particular colour. But as I add colours, so there's 255, let's go back to the green, 128, and it gives me this mild colour. The more green I put in, the more it heads towards cyan. So if I now put 255, I get that nice cyan. If I ignore that one and put more red in, then it heads towards purple. And if I do a mixture, then I get more intensities. I've probably gone too high with that one. Let's go for 100, and it washes the colours out. If I lower the blue now to 200, and you can see 20, I get this brown colour. You might even notice these hex values before, and that's something worth exploring, but that's not for us to do in this one. So I can fill the background colour with an incredibly wide range of colours. How many colours? Well, as I say, the maximum value of red we've got is 255. The maximum number of greens is 255. Don't forget, one of those values is 0. So though the maximum value is 255, we have 256 shades of red. No red to all red. Same thing with green. 256 different shades of green, from no green to all green. And the same thing with blue. So the maximum value is 255, but the number of colours, number of shades, is 256. So let's just use Excel to help us here. Red, there are, put that in capitals to make it stand out, and we go for green, and we go for blue. There are 256 shades of red. There are 256 shades of green, and there are 256 shades of blue. Now, if I have all the shades of red, then I can quite simply, I then can multiply that by the number of green, because I can use 0 or 1 or 2 and 256 times 1 and so on. So what I can do is multiply that by the 256 to see how many different combinations of red and green there are. But obviously I've got blue as well, so I can do multiply by that, because the number of colours is the number of shades of red multiplied by the number of shades of green multiplied by the number of shades of blue. How many different combinations are there of me giving red, green and blue if there's 256 different values of each? And the answer is 16.7 million different shades, different colours. So using that system gives us 16.7 million colours. I think that's enough for us to fill our grid up nicely. And there's certain nice little tricks we can do here. For example, if I set this as black, then notice I now can't see the letter, because the foreground, the font colour, is the same as the background colour. That's obvious. The nice thing is I can do that with red. If I select the red and I tell the font to do the same, I lose the text. It's still there. I can see that in the formula bar. But anyone looking at my cells won't see that. They'll just see the colour. So matching foreground or font colour to background does sometimes make it more presentable with your data. Your data's still there, but they don't need to see the values. So that's formatting cells in the sense of filling them with colour, and that becomes nice and useful in the next revision exercise using the times table square, and that's where we're going in the next video. So see you in the next video. Okay, so we ended the last lesson looking at video looking at formatting cells, and I've still got the lesson open. What I want to do is go File, Save, then File, Close. Once it's closed, I then want to go to File, and I want to find the times table square that we were looking at before. Open that up, and if you remember, that's where we got to with our grid system. And what we're going to do is we're going to use, first of all, the autofill to simply fill some numbers in here. So I'm just going to put 1 and then go there and right click, pull that down to there and simply tell it to fill series. I'm going to do the same thing there. 1, click away, click back, bottom right hand corner, hold down the right hand mouse button, pull across, let go of the mouse button, click on fill series. I've got those there. I'm then going to center these nicely and bold them and increase the font simply by using that button until I get a nice font size. I can see that's font size 16. I'm going to do the same thing here. Select all those, center, center, bold, and then increase it to size 16. So I've got that nice balance there. So we've got a nice look there. Now we want to separate these numbers, which we're going to use to do calculations, from these ones here that we're going to do the calculations with. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select those again. I'm going to do the bucket fill, and I'm going to choose a shade of something. There you go, a yellow. And I'm going to do the same thing here. I'm going to choose a different shade just to show I can. And I've got that there. So we've got the beginnings of our times table square, and what I'm going to do now is I'm going to use this cell here to start to do the calculation. And this is the times table square, and you might remember these from school, and all we're going to do is multiply this one by this one. So it's simply enough equals this cell, I've used my mouse to click, multiplied by, remember that's Shift 8, this cell here, and press enter. Now we can see that the numbers down the bottom, so I'm going to select all of these because we're going to use all of them, and I'm going to tell it to be centered. I'm not going to bold, but I am going to take up to 16 so that these stand out. Now what we're going to do is do the fill series. So all we're going to do is grab that bottom right hand corner and drag downwards. Now we can see the hash marks, and as I said before, those hash marks aren't an error as such. It's saying the numbers are too great for that particular cell. And if we look, that seems to work. 1 times 1 is 1 and 1 times 2 is 2. But as soon as we get to the 3, we've got the 1 times 3 is 6. So let's have a look at what's happening. We're doing this, we can see the blue boundary, B3 times C2. And if we go down to this cell, we can see that though the result looks correct, it's multiplying the wrong thing. We're multiplying correctly by this cell, but instead of multiplying by C2, it's moved down to C3 due to that relative addressing problem. So what's changed? And this is the hardest part with working this part out. Identifying what is changed and what you need to lock, what you need to make absolute. So we're at C2, but we've gone to C3. So we can see that the 3 has changed. The 2 has changed to a 3. So if we now go back to the original, there's the C2, the 2 changed to a 3, so we need to put a dollar in front of that. Remember, I could press F4, I've just typed it. It doesn't make much difference. Now if I drag that down and fill series all the way down, it's correct. 1 times 10 is 10, and if we look, it's locked into that cell, but allowed this one to move. So you should only use absolute addressing to absolutely lock in what you want. Don't lock in things you don't need to lock, just to see how that goes. Okay, now what else can we do? Well, now let's drag this way. Now again, we've got the same error, because this time we've got the B3 times C and locked 2, but let's see what's happening here. The B3 has become C3, so the B has changed to the C, and that's happened all the way through, and we can see that we've got an error there. So we need to go back to the original, and in this case look at the B for the first reference and lock that in place with the dollar. We've now got 2 locked absolute references. Absolutely column B, but row 3, that can change. Column C can change, but absolutely row 2. How does that help us? Well, now what I can do is I can pull that formula down. Remember, I've got one formula here. In fact, what I'm going to do, just to show you, I'm going to delete all of the existing formulae. And what I'm going to do is go to that one and I'm going to drag it down, just as we did before. We know this works. Unless that $B has broken it, that should work, and it still does. There's no reason for that to have not worked, because the B3 has worked. Now if we'd locked the 3, that would have broken it, but we haven't. It's still looking at column B, and that's perfectly fine. But what I'm now going to do is, rather than go back up to the top and pull across, I'm simply going to grab the handle down here at the bottom and drag across. So I've only actually had to drag down, and then I can do all cells. There are 100 cells here. 2 drags will create 100 cells, and I've now got a times table square that works. And the cool thing about this is we've only used one formulae. We have only used one set of calculations, set it up correctly, and that has successfully completed all of these for us. So we now have our times table square. Our times table square is in place. There's things we'd like to do to sort out this times table square, make it a little bit easier to work with, and we're going to reconstruct it in a way just to get certain colours sorted and lay it out better. But that's for the next revision exercise, not for now. So, see you in the next video.